How in this video we'll be talking about the rashis and the body parts. And in the Brihad Parashara Hora Shastra we find the following statement. The head, mouth, arms, breast, cavity, hips, pelvic triangle, covered parts, buttocks, the pair of thighs, shanks, and the 2 feet are the body parts proceeding from Aries. So Parashara, he tells us now that the cosmic man is not only time personified, but that he also has a body, and that those 12 rashis of the zodiac, starting from Aries, they are actually the 12 sections of his body. And they are also the 12 sections of the human body, right? So this concept of the zodiac representing the human body is a very important concept. But it is largely actually ignored outside of medical astrology, right? In medical astrology, we look at these body parts, right? We say if Aries is afflicted, which represents the head, right? Then there is likely that the person is gonna get some injury, to the head. We use the sign and also the equivalent house to see the sickness in the body. So if it's Aries, which is the head, then we also look at the first house having sort of the same connotation as Aries, and we relate any type of head diseases to them. But there's actually much more to it. When it comes to the rashis, one of the best symbols we can use is actually the body parts of those rashis, right? Every body part relates to a sign, and there's a lot of meaning behind it, right? So, and if you think about the symbols and what the different body parts represent, then you will get a very deep understanding of the rashis. And so this is actually quite important. Let's start with Aries. So Aries is the head. The head is everything that is back of your hairline, but it does not include your face, and it's also your forehead. So basically, Aries rules the head, that is everything except for your face, okay? And Aries is the first thing. The first thing in our body is the head, right? We have our birth with our head first. And Aries therefore symbolizes our foundations, right? Aries is the body part of laying foundations and starting things. And so if a person has good planets in Aries, then they know how to create foundations in their life, right? Lots of times we think of Aries to be, the sign that starts things but never finishes anything. That's only actually if Aries is afflicted, because then they create weak foundations in their life. But if you get nice planets in Aries, then you basically get a person who is able to start things and set foundations for things that can last for a long time. For example, Samuel Hahnemann, he is the person that developed homeopathy, and he has nice planets in Aries, including the Sun. So he set the foundation for a whole new medical practice, right? Now in the body, the head is actually the most important part, right? That's why Aries is actually so important. And if Aries has afflicted planets in it, then that really sets a person back in life, right? When Aries has good and healthy planets in it, then it's going to really give a person a head start in life, because the foundations and the things that they start doing, they will be really solid, and they will last, and they can stand upon them. And then for the rest of their life, they can just build on them, right? But the head is really so important, obviously. It's the center of our intelligence, right? In Aries, that's where our brain is, and that's where our intelligence is found, right? It comes as no surprise that the sun is exalted in Aries. Parashara says that the sun is intelligent. So the sun in Aries becomes especially intelligent because it's exalted there, right? But what kind of intelligence is it? Well, it's an intelligence of being able to do new things, right? To have new ideas of of whatever it is that you want to do in your life, right? Aries is the first sign, and so it's able to basically create foundations and start something successfully. Now, when we think of Aries, we might ask, well, what's going on in your head, right? Because that's what Aries is all about. It's our head. And the sun in Aries, that is exalted there, that makes a person to be really creative, really original, right? They have all these amazing ideas in their head, right? On the other hand, Saturn in Aries is debilitated. And, why is Saturn there debilitated? Well, Saturn represents our bad experience in life, right? That we remember, that we want to avoid. And that causes a lot of fear, right? And those negative thoughts, they sort of, tend to follow us, like a shadow in our head when Saturn is in Aries, right? Then we tend to, create sort of things in our life that just end up like, a really bad story for us, and we, fail in life with a lot of things, right? Because we do not have those positive inspired thoughts that our life could actually work out and we can do some amazing things here, but we have all these negative thoughts, and that's what's actually then also going to happen to us, right? So by looking at what planet is exalted and debilitated in a sign based on the body parts, you can get a lot of insights, right? The sun represents our inspirations and ambitions to realize our highest potential, and it's exalted in the head. Right? Saturn represents our weaknesses and sorrows, and he's debilitated in our head, right? So if the miseries are in our head all the time, and if everything we do in life we approach from a foundation of our trauma instead of a foundation of truth and creative inspirations, then we end up having a debilitated Saturn in our horoscope, right? And what I actually found quite interesting in medical astrology, that people who get to the point where they just can't function well anymore in their life, it usually takes some planets actually to get them to the point that, their life, they just can't carry on anymore as before, right? They get to a point of really feeling depressed about their life, right? But if there's only one planet that's in really bad shape and that gets them to that same point of not functioning properly anymore, it's almost always Saturn in Aries, right? That's because the head is the most important part of our body, right? All our strengths and abilities are located in our head. And the head ultimately is the control center of the body, right? It's just so important, right? Because the brain really governs all our functions, right? And, really just knowing that Aries is the head, we should be able to, infer other things about Aries, right? Aries, then, because it is the head, then it is naturally going to govern over our life, right? So let's say if you're working in a company and let's say you need to vote for a new leader of a department, well, make sure that the person has got good stuff in Aries, because that's the sign of the governor, right? The 10th house, of course, is also important for sort of having that, highest position, power, and authority in the company and actually be able to lead others properly. But a powerful Aries will really go a long way for doing a good job as a director, being able to oversee and direct the affairs of a department, right? So it's, the head is just so important, right? Because the brain really, is the governor, the overseer of our life. And not only that, it of course also oversees, most importantly, and governs all of our bodily functions, right? And that's, of course, a quality of Aries. And that is also the reason why the sun or the king is exalted in Aries, right? Because he is, the planet that is most suited for governing, right? And so this part of our body is really capable of governing, right? And so when we stick the king in our head, the sun in Aries, then we become really capable governors, right? Rulers. But if we instead put Saturn in Aries, or the servant in Aries, then that makes us just not capable of governing, right? We don't know what we're supposed to do when we're actually on the top, right? I'm in this leadership position and I'm meant to take care of my project, but I'm not capable because I have my Saturn in Aries, okay? And so people with Saturn in Aries, they are not able to manifest all their potential properly, right? People actually might do really well as kids, right? But when they grow up and when they are supposed to, start to lay their foundations and, create and build their kingdom, then with Saturn in Aries, you would just see that actually from that point onwards, their life just gets worse, right? They just can't govern their life well, right? When we get a servant governing our life, then we just get into a lot of problems. So it's important that the sun in Aries gets help from, his friends, Mercury and Venus, and then over time this person can actually learn and get better. The brain is actually very complex, right? We got our brain, our pituitary glands, our pineal gland, the hypothalamus. We got all these critical body parts. All these glands are there for the proper functioning of our happiness ultimately, right? Our health and happiness are dependent on those hormonal glands, right? The endocrine system has its own management, right? The pituitary gland and hypothalamus, they are managing the whole body and collect information from all parts and decide on the amount of secreted hormones, right? And so the serotonin, for example, that's of course secreted by the hypothalamus. And this hormone is responsible so that we have some good sleep, right? This gives us sort of this calming effect. It has an influence also on our digestive system. It controls blood pressure and even plays an important part in the menstrual cycle, right? And when there's a problem with the serotonin, let's say we have a deficiency that leads to insomnia, mood swings, sadness, eating disorders, and so on, right? And so one of the most difficult actually diseases to cure are really those diseases that are caused by malfunctioning hypothalamus, pituitary glands, and pineal gland, right? If any of those is not working properly, then you are really in trouble because they're really hard to repair, right? So in the head, there are all these important glands, and they're important for our overall health, right? Not just physical health, but even also for our emotional well-being. And when there's afflicted planets in Aries, this can really make for some very difficult diseases that are really hard to cure. Now, this is just an example that I wanted to give you about the head and how important the head is just physiologically. Of course, the head is so complex. It is only very little understood. Astrology can also give some amazing insights actually about the structure and the functions obviously of the brain. But it is obvious that the head is there's a reason why he's on top of our body, because he's the control center. He is the most critical part of our body, because through the head we govern the rest of our body. Okay, so now we can spend hours talking about the brain and the glands and all the other parts that are there. But I just wanted to convey really a basic idea about, the importance of Aries, right? It's the part that is most responsible for our well-being. If you don't have anything in Aries, that's fine. If you have trouble planets there, then you really need to work on those troubles planets as a priority, right? This needs to be really the first thing that you need to work out. So next, let's talk about Taurus. Taurus is the face. Face is the part of the body where we get many of our needs met. And the reason is, in the face are our senses, right? We taste through the mouth, we see through the eyes, we hear through the ears, and we smell through the nose, right? Those 4 important senses are in the face, right? And we have our senses to interact with the world, to assess it, and to fulfill our needs. And we direct our senses, here and there, and we also actually use our neck to direct those senses, right? That's why Taurus also has to do with the neck area, right? The face and the neck are Taurus. The face without neck wouldn't be as useful because we would only be able to sense what's right in front of us, right? But then that's not an efficient use really of our sense organs, right? When you're eating, you're using your neck, right? When you go and grab something to eat in the fridge, right? You use your neck. So to fulfill our needs, our neck is really important. And that is why the face and the neck astrologically are ruled by one, we could say, place, which is Taurus, because, together they allow us to spot what we need and then, to get it and fulfill us, okay? So Taurus is the sign of getting our needs met, right? Of seeing, what's outside of ourselves and to get them inside of us, right? Where they can do some good, okay? And therefore the moon is also exalted in Taurus, right? The moon represents our needs and the nourishment that we require, both emotionally and in any other way. And a person is able to get their needs met when the moon is in Taurus, right? They are aware of their needs and they're very able to adapt to having their needs met, okay? There's no planets debilitated in Taurus, right? So if you understand what the faith is about, the senses and what the neck is doing, then you get a pretty good picture about Taurus, right? Taurus is about discerning our needs, going around and finding what we need, and then, swallowing them or in some way, enjoying them and getting nourished by them. And that's really what Taurus is all about. And happy planets in Taurus, they help a person fulfill their needs, right? They help them to know what they need, to find it, and to, enjoy it, okay? So when you get afflicted planets there though, perhaps difficult planetary combinations that are mutual enemies, such as the Sun and Saturn, then the person is unable to know what they need, right? They are unable to find what they need, or perhaps somehow they are unable to really enjoy and fulfill their need, okay? So when Taurus is afflicted, a person will suffer from, we could say, a low self-esteem and somehow feel guilty and not worthy with regards to fulfilling their material needs, and not, having sort of a healthy outlook on life and positive thoughts about how they can have a comfortable and enjoyable life here, then it will just be very hard for them, to fulfill their needs. They will somehow or another always do things in a way that they are just not going to get fulfilled, okay? And so think of Taurus really in this context of that this is the body part that is designed to get our needs met, right? To know them, to see them, to consume them, and to be fulfilled by them. And afflictions to Taurus makes it really difficult. Right? Anytime you see Taurus afflicted, then you know that a person is not going to get their needs met, right? Whereas when Taurus is in good shape, then the person has a great ability to get their needs met, okay? Now also study Venus and the moon, right? Because the moon is exalted in Taurus. Anytime that you study a sign, look, of course, at the planet that rules the sign, but also look at the planet that is exalted there, because he's also going to play a role in it. Right? For example, Aries is the head, which governs all our bodily functions and all our actions, and the sun is exalted there. Right? So the sun also is a governing planet. Right? It's the planet of leading and taking responsibility for achieving our goals. Right? So we have to look at Aries, at Mars, and the planet that is exalted in Aries, which is the sun. Right? So when we judge Taurus, then we look at Venus and also the moon to understand a person's ability to fulfill their needs. Right? The moon is exalted in Taurus, and the moon plays a big role in how we are able to fulfill our needs in a concrete manner. So now let's talk about some of the other physical components that we actually can find in the sign of Taurus. Right? We already talked about the face and the senses and also the neck. So now let's talk about some other things. So in Taurus we can also find the teeth, the salivary glands in the mouth, then also the tonsils as well, the cheekbones, the jaw, the larynx, and therefore the majority actually of the organs of speaking and communicating are there. Taurus also holds actually the upper portions of the esophagus and the trachea. So now let's think about some of these organs and what that mean and what they mean for us. Okay. So the larynx. The larynx is that part in our throat that allows us to make sound when we speak with our tongue. So that actually shows how important speaking is in order to get our needs fulfilled, right? If we have planets afflicted in Taurus, then we will find it difficult actually to speak in ways to get our needs met, right? Because we cannot verbalize our needs properly. Now, Taurus holds the majority of the organs that are related to speaking. In Cancer, we also find the lower lungs that are also connected to our ability to speak. But Taurus is really where most of the speaking really takes place. Okay, and if a person has happy planets there, then a person will be they will be very capable in really expressing and verbalizing their needs. And this is really the responsibility of Taurus, to say what you need, so that you can fulfill your needs. So next, our teeth. What do our teeth do? Well, they really break things down so that the food that we eat, it can nourish us, okay? We can't just swallow a whole apple, right? We have our teeth to break the apple into smaller chunks so that we can then chew it into even smaller chunks, okay? And so Taurus has that ability. They know, okay, I have this need, I'm aware of it, but now I am also going to do the work so that I actually get my need met. I'm going to get the apple and I'm going to chew it, okay? And so that's the quality of Taurus. Taurus is really willing to work so that they can fulfill their needs, okay? Which is symbolized by the act of chewing and the teeth. Now, interesting enough is that our jaw muscles, they are actually one of the most powerful muscles in our body. And the jaw muscles, therefore, they do a tremendous amount of work actually. And this also shows that Taurus is really capable of a huge amount of work. And they put all this energy into what they do so that they can get their needs met, right? Now, we also have the tonsils in the back, of our, you could say, our neck, okay? And that's also a really important part of Taurus, right? The tonsils cause our throat to be inflamed anytime that we eat something that is bad for us, okay? And this is really one of the things that Taurus is really good for, right? It tells us if something is bad for us, right? And if there is good planets in Taurus, then the person really has the ability to discern if something in their life is really bad or good for them. If a person has afflicted planets in Taurus, then they will be unable to determine what's good and bad for them, right? It's like they can, they might sit on a table and eat all sorts of stuff that is actually not really good for them, okay? And they might not be even aware of it, okay? And the reason is really because it really symbolizes that they don't have tonsils that really work well, right? They can eat all sorts of junk food and they do not get a sore throat, right? They can have all sorts of painful things in their life, toxic, relationships, a work that they don't like, a place they don't like to work in. And all those things, they might drain them and cause them a lot of grief, but they just can't, they can't see why they should stop consuming them, okay? Normally, if a person has a healthy Taurus, then if they eat bad food, right, or food that somehow are not suitable for them, then they get a sore throat, right? Because it's those tonsils that actually let us know they basically warn us that if something is just not good for us, and they do that by giving us a sore throat. And then we realize, oh, actually, I shouldn't really eat that. This is not good for me, right? And people who eat really healthy, their tonsils actually, they become very sensitive to any sort of bad things, right? Immediately upon eating something that's not healthy, right? Then they feel sort of that sort of constriction in their throat. Of course, nowadays, so much unhealthy living is going on. People don't know really anymore what is good for them. And so they might just eat bad food all the time, and their tonsils, they basically just give up, right? They say, well, I tried to warn you so many times, but I'm gonna quit here, do whatever you want. I'm not gonna waste my time here anymore. But if people do have a good Taurus and their tonsils work well, and they're actually maintaining a healthy life, then usually sort of the smallest thing they sort of notice that is actually not good for them, okay? So Taurus is really, you could say, watching out for us, right? Signaling to us and letting us know that something is not good for us. And people who have a good Taurus, they're very sensitive to the environment, to the people in their life, that they know, oh, this is really good for me, this is beneficial for me, or this is very detrimental for me. And I shouldn't really, try to fulfill my needs here. Instead, I do this in order to fulfill my needs.